everybody, my name is Colt, welcome to Gone Hollow Minis, and this is the first inaugural Tarnished Tuesday. This is the new format that I'm going to be using to paint the Elden Ring the board game miniatures. A lot of these guys are smaller, maybe less interesting minis on their own, which would make kind of difficult videos for a full 10-minute long segment. So instead, I'm going to be painting them up in these smaller, more chill, less formal, shorter segments. And today we're going to be working on the strays. You get a ton of these guys in the different boxes that Elden Ring comes in. These particular ones are from the Weeping Peninsula. I'm working on 2 right now, but the process will be the same for both these guys and the Stormvale Castle ones. The models are the same with the same bases and everything, so it should be pretty applicable. You can see here I'm just working on getting the base out of the way first. It's maybe not the most interesting of the textured base varieties, but we can work with that. To make the dirt a little bit more interesting, I've started with a base of Vallejo Olive Green and Army Painter Brigandine Brown. The variation here will help our dry brushing appear a little bit more interesting, even though it is just dirt. For the stone, I'm starting with Red Hull, also from Vallejo. This is my go-to for all of my stony textured areas. Now that our base coats are done, we're going to start with dry brushing. This is pretty much the easiest and most efficient way to do dirt on any of your miniatures. This is Vallejo Leather Brown, a nice desaturated, dirty brown color, obviously. Then after that layer, I mix a little bit of Vallejo Ochre Brown into my Leather Brown. This gives it a slightly warmer, a little bit more yellow feel. That's a great mid-tone. Just make sure to stay away from dry brushing your rock. It's not the end of the world if you do end up hitting it, but best is to try not to. And then the final dry brush layer is straight Vallejo Ochre Brown. Same deal as the last time, this is just to give us a little bit more warmth and a little bit more variation in our dirt. And then for the final step, this is a little bit of Army Painter Darkskin Shade. You can use any brown tone, this is just the one that I had on hand. I'm going to apply this mostly into the deeper recesses and cracks. It's kind of hard to see from this angle, but there's a little bit of a lip there that runs through the middle of this base, so I'm going to try to deepen those shadows a bit. Once those are applied, I can also work on feathering that into the rest of the base to bring a little bit more depth to the rest of our dirt while keeping those recesses darker. Now, being careful not to hit our wash that's still drying, I'm going to go ahead and dry brush the stone. This starts with Army Painter Deep Gray, then goes to Vallejo Sky Gray, before finally being finished off with Vallejo Ivory. I also made the mistake of trying to apply my base rim now, but there's a whole lot of work to do, and the Citadel clamp that I used to hold my minis eventually wore some of this off, so just do it later. Now we can finally move on to painting our miniature. If you watched my previous Elden Ring video on how to paint the Misbegotten, this is probably familiar. We're going to go ahead and start with a value sketch designed to catch some of the details sculpted into our plastic. This will make them easier to pick out and paint later. And of course, for the full beginner's guide on how to do dry brushing smartly, check out the previous Elden Ring video where I talk all about it. Suffice to say that the most important part of this process, though, is to knock your miniature off of your painting handle. When you stick it back on your painting handle, make sure that your camera autofocus doesn't actually focus on the miniature. And then, for one last final touch, knock it back off the painting handle, again, for good measure. But now that we've wisened up and just glued our miniature onto its base, we can go ahead and start working on the skin. Again, if you saw the Misbegotten video, this recipe will be kind of familiar. There's a lot of sallow, diseased skin in Elden Ring, what can I say? This is a base of Rakarth flesh, and I'm going to make sure I hit all of the fleshy parts on our model. So the rib cage, kind of the snout area, and his little underbelly that looks kind of skeletal, but I don't know if it actually is or not, so I'm just going to paint it as if it's really thin, desiccated skin. But with our skin base coats applied, we can go ahead and apply the fur base coats as well. This is Army Painter Deep Gray mixed with a little bit of Vallejo Camo Green. And the point of mixing in a little bit of green here is just to give the coat a little bit of a more diseased, grungy feel. And don't worry, we'll reinforce this with our highlight layers that are coming up soon. But now with our base coats applied, we can go ahead and move into the wash stage. This is magenta tone, thinned a little bit. I don't know if my bottle is just extra thick, but it is kind of goopy. I'm going to push this into some of the recesses and more tender areas of this dog. So the rib cage area looks a little bit pink, the gums especially look a little bit pink, and kind of again by that midriff area. And then the rest of the skin will get a wash of Army Painter Dark Skin Tone. Again, if you've seen the Misbegotten video, this is pretty familiar. Get used to it, it'll be coming up pretty often in the Elden Ring series. Now, I don't usually recommend doing all-over washes like this, but I think board game miniatures are an exception. With these guys, as opposed to like Warhammer or Wargaming minis, a lot of the painting process is more about picking out the sculpted detail than anything else, and washes are a really quick way to help us get a leg up on that. Which is good when we have, again, 10 of these identical dogs to paint for a game night. The fur areas are going to get a wash of Citadel Rattling Grime. This is traditionally a contrast paint, so make sure you thin it quite a bit before you apply it. But this is going to go all over our fur to give it a really nice, really grungy, really gross shadow tone. With our washes applied, now we can go back and work on reining those colors in a little bit. Sometimes washes have a tendency to get a little bit too heavy-handed, so now we want to go back with our mid-tones to re-establish our middle tones. I like to start with the skin here because it's usually surrounded by fur, which means that it'll be a little bit harder to take care of if we do it second. But this is just Rakarth flesh, and I'm going back over the ribs, spines, and some of the other more prominent areas that shouldn't have gotten hit with the wash as heavy as they did. But with that done, we can go ahead and mix a little bit of Brain Matter Beige into our Rakarth flesh. This is a nice, brighter highlight color that we can apply to all of the uppermost areas on our miniature. Pay special attention to the spine, the heel, and the upper parts of the ribs, as well as the snout. Now for the fur, I'm going to mix a little bit of Vallejo Iraqi sand into my Armored Painter Deep Gray. This gives me a slightly more desaturated but lighter tone to start my highlights. Just like with the skin, I'm going to focus on building up the volumes on my higher points. So around the shoulders, around the back, on either side of the spine, and around the face. This final brightest layer is just Vallejo Green Gray. Focus this on the highest highlights in the areas that would receive the most light. In particular, I've found that sketching out the eyebrow area really adds a lot of character and detail to our mini. Now just a couple final details. I wanted to keep the eyes nice and black and beady, so I just did them with a couple black dots and then gave them a couple dotted reflection highlights later on. And just one final detail is to outline the teeth. This is just Vallejo Ivory applied to the very tips of the teeth. This is a pretty simple step that adds a lot of detail to the mini that I definitely recommend you try out. This might not be my finest paint work, but I think it brings up a pretty good point. You're going to be painting a lot of these guys, and by and large they're going to be seen from an arm's length at closest. So try not to sweat painting these little gribblies. I always ascribe to the belief that painted minis are better than unpainted minis, no matter the subjective quality, and I'm sure your gaming group will agree and appreciate your effort as well. So now we got a handful of these little gribblies painted up, between the Misbegotten and the dogs. Still got a couple more to go, but that's okay. Next up on the plate might be these scaly and winged Misbegotten, who might get a double feature for their video. But at the same time, some of these heroes do also need to get some paint still, so let me know in the comments which one you'd like to see next. And of course, until next Tarnished Tuesday, my friends, be safe, be kind, and don't you dare go hollow.